Hello everybody. This is technically my second video documenting my pregnancy journey, and if you haven't had a chance to watch the first video, I encourage you to watch it just so you can get a full picture of my personal situation. So this is going to focus on the next interesting turn of my pregnancy. So previously, I found out I was still pregnant after a failed abortion. I began my prenatal care. Everything was looking good. So when I went to my OB, maybe for like my second prenatal visit, she told me that my fluid looked low. And she asked me, like, had I been leaking fluid? And I was like, no, but I've had discharge, so I don't really know. I asked her, how would I know that it was fluid? So she said it would be like water, warm, it wouldn't have an odor. So she kind of, put me on notice about what to expect if I would leak fluid. But up until that point, I hadn't leaked any fluid. So because my fluid looked low to her on the ultrasound, she referred me to a specialist so that he could look at my fluid and see if it looked low to him. So I went to the specialist. He said that, it's fluid there. He can understand why she thought it looked low, but we're just going to wait until you're 20 weeks and you do your anatomy scan. That's when I'm going to officially measure your fluid and determine if I think it's low at that point. So I'm like, okay. So that was good news. I was 16 weeks and 1 day when I had that appointment. The very next day, at 16 weeks and 2 days, my water broke. In the house, it's like 10 o'clock at night. Wasn't doing much, just like walking around, getting ready for bed. And I literally felt like a warm gush run down my legs. And I'm like, what was that? So I go look in the mirror, and it's just clear fluid running down my legs. So at that point, I knew that my water had broken because my OBGYN had already explained to me how it would look, how it would feel. So that was the first thing that came to my mind. That was the first time my water ever broke. So this is my third pregnancy. My water never broke previously. So if it weren't for her like explaining in detail what leaking fluid would be like, I can understand why some people don't initially go to the hospital when that happens. If it's never happened to you before, you might, because it's a lot going on down there when you're pregnant. So you might just feel like that was weird, but okay. But once my water broke, I immediately started getting ready for the ER because, she had already told me what to do. But had I not had that forewarning, I could see myself kind of waiting to see what would happen after that before I went to the ER. So I'm saying that to say, if you experience something like that, make sure you go ahead and go to the hospital, especially if your water is breaking prematurely. Because again, I was 16 weeks. So I went to the ER closest to my house, and they just weren't prioritizing me. I had already been told that this was a medical emergency. I'm only 16 weeks. My water is not supposed to be breaking. So I waited there for 40 minutes. They checked my vitals, and they got ready to send me back to the waiting room. And I was like, I don't need to be waiting. I'm leaking fluid still right now. And the nurse had no idea. He was like, oh, the check-in person didn't let me know what you were here for. So then he sent me straight to the back to wait for a doctor. When I go to the back, they sit me in the hallway. Not even in a bed in a hallway, or even in sometimes they have the little clear cubicles, from COVID. It wasn't that. It was literally like a waiting chair. Like if I was a guest waiting for somebody in the hallway. Doctors are just walking past me, looking leisurely, but I don't know if they were doing something or not, but they was not worried about me. So I stopped one doctor hey, I need to see somebody. I'm leaking fluid right now. I'm only 16 weeks. She's like, I'll be right with you. And she just kept walking, didn't even pause to look at me and, give me any type of reassurance. So I left. I drove about 25 minutes away to the next hospital and restart the process all over. At the second hospital, I had like a 45 minute to 1 hour wait, but I did feel prioritized because, you know, when you go to the ER, you're going to wait. So that comes with the territory. But as long as things are moving along, I can deal with it. So I tell them what happened. They examine me, and they do like a test where they put paper inside your vagina to check and make sure that the fluid is actually amniotic fluid. And so one of the doctors did that test on me, and it was, she confirmed that it was amniotic fluid. And then I just got like a bedside ultrasound because the sonographer is not on duty overnight. So I got like a bedside ultrasound. From that ultrasound, she did confirm like I had little to no fluid. So as she was doing the ultrasound, I already knew that this was like a bad sign. So as she was doing the ultrasound, I just started getting very emotional. I didn't look at the screen while she was doing the ultrasound. I just started crying. So once she was done, I went to the bathroom, like started crying. Again, my partner was there and he gave me reassurance again and just like said, like, you know, we're gonna get through this no matter what happens, like it's gonna be okay, and just gave me a hug and just made me feel a little bit more relieved in that moment. So I was very grateful for that. So we kind of just waited for the doctor to like come back in and let us know what they would do. So the doctor comes back in and she's just like, it's nothing they can do. I'm only 16 weeks. When people water break this early, the baby like has really no chance of survival. And she made that very clear. She was like, you know, of course there is a chance that the baby could still grow and survive, but it's very, very rare. And it's nothing we can do. So you can spend the night and we can get the sonographer to confirm what we see on the ultrasound in the morning, and then we'll go from there. And I had a lot of questions, but I was just so emotional that I didn't feel like talking. And so my partner did a really good job of like asking questions and getting a little bit more clarity. And the nurse that we were talking to was very nice and, you know, very patient. So I definitely appreciated the way that she handled that situation. So I wound up spending the night, woke up early, 7 o'clock in the morning, got the ultrasound from the sonographer, and she confirmed what the doctor had said the night before. Well, she gave the results to the doctor, so another doctor came in to reconfirm what they told me the night before. But this doctor just seemed very abrasive, like considering the situation. I just wish she had been a little bit more compassionate and empathetic, because we're talking about you have to go home and wait to have a miscarriage. There's nothing we can do because your baby still has a heartbeat. And because of the heartbeat law, we can't intervene, but you don't have any fluid. You're only 16 weeks. You're not likely to make it far enough where we consider this pregnancy viable. So I'm like crying. I'm just like, okay, like it's nothing. I have things to say, but I'm just like in my emotions at the time. So I didn't have much to say, especially to somebody that I felt like didn't care that much. So the nurse brought me my discharge papers, and I'm just literally like sitting in the bed, and I'm just like, as I'm like getting ready to think about leaving, I started getting upset. So I'm like, I need to see the doctor again. Like, I have questions. So they sent another doctor in, and this doctor was much more empathetic, and she did basically say the same thing, but she provided me reassurance that you give a fuck that you have to send me home like this. Like, that's what mattered to me, because I was so confused. Like, y'all really just sending people home telling them to wait to have a miscarriage? Like, that's messed up. So the second doctor was like, you know, due to this heartbeat law, we can't intervene. She was like, as a medical provider, this is not something that I would ever do or suggest. Like, once your water break as early as 16 weeks, the baby has a very low chance of survival. So we would usually go ahead and do a medical abortion in these situations. But since this law passed just in October, we literally can't do anything because the baby still has a heartbeat. And then she went on to explain, like, she's a third-year resident, and she was just saying that she's not even considering taking jobs in Georgia because of this law. And she was saying that it's very hard for her to have these conversations with her patients because she understands, like, how that must feel for us to just, like, feel helpless and hopeless. So, she basically said, there's nothing we can do. So I asked her, like, how long does a miscarriage usually take once your water break? And she was like, I can't put a definite number on it because everybody's body is different. But she said there's data that shows about 7 days. And then I ended up asking another doctor later, and they told me 2 weeks. So in my head, at 2 weeks, within the next 2 weeks, I'm expecting to have a miscarriage. That's what was in my head at that point. So at that point, when I'm getting ready to get discharged from this hospital, by this time it's like 11 a.m., I'm just not ready to accept that there's nothing I can do. Like, it's very hard as a mother to just say, okay, I gotta go home and wait for my baby to die. That is so hard to process. That is so hard to just let go and do. Like, from day one, this baby is placed inside of your body, and you feel responsible for doing your part to nourish that life. So my mom encouraged me to go to another ER once I left there, and I was so tired because, of course, I was up all night, and I had to wake up real early. I didn't want to go to another ER, but just in my head, I'm just feeling like I have to do my due diligence. I'm going to at least seek a second opinion and just see what happens. If they tell me the same thing, at least I'm already emotionally prepared to hear that, but hopefully they don't tell me the same thing. So around noon, I get to the next hospital. So at this point, it's the third hospital within like a 14-hour span that I have been to about this situation. So I get to the third hospital. It's the next day. So at this point, I'm technically 16 weeks and 3 days. And I start the process over. I don't even tell them that I went to another ER. I just start the process over. I told them my water broke last night, gave them a whole rundown. They examined me. They do an ultrasound. They confirmed that the fluid is low. People were getting so wrapped up in like the failed abortion part of my story. So that was having them completely stumped. And then now having my water break at 16 weeks. And at this point it's February. So this Georgia heartbeat law had just passed in October. So this is, and I'm in the ER. So I'm not being seen by OBGYNs. I'm being seen by the ED doctor. And he's letting me know, like, he was so apologetic. Like, he was like, I'm so sorry you should have to go through this, but this is my first time having to confront this law. And he was just like, it's just unfortunate that your baby is not likely to survive this, but because of this law, it's really nothing that we can do. And I was like, yeah, I understand, because of course I had heard this already. And he did have access to my chart. So he was like, was this explained to you? And I said yes. And he did contact my OBGYN, my regular OBGYN that I was seeing for my prenatal care, to let her know what was going on. So I was discharged, and my OBGYN called me, which one is a big deal to me, because I've never had a doctor like reach out to me to check on me and keep tabs on me. And they're usually very hard to contact, even when you have like the phone numbers and the portals. Like, it's not easy to just be able to call your doctor, like your actual doctor. You might talk to somebody in their office, but it's not easy to have that direct contact. So it really stood out to me that, one, she called me, and that she was just concerned about my situation. So that made me feel like very appreciative of her. And so she, you know, told me my options. But this was the first time it was explained to me a little bit differently. She said, you're 16 weeks. We really don't consider the pregnancy viable until 22 weeks. And she was like, you know, the baby is not likely to survive. If the baby did not have a heartbeat, we could go ahead and do a medical abortion. But because the baby has a heartbeat, we can't do anything but wait for you to go home and have a miscarriage. Or if you start developing signs of an infection, you can come back, and then we could make an argument for a reason that you would need to get a medical abortion, even if the baby still has a heartbeat. So I'm like, okay. But this was the first time that someone thoroughly explained that there is a chance that you can make it to 22 weeks. So like the doctor previously did say, like, it's very rare, but it's not likely to happen. That's different from saying some people make it, but we just don't want to give you false hope because it's not likely. So once she said that, my brain shifted just a little bit, because I'm like, okay, so I don't have to have a miscarriage. Like, as long as my baby has a heartbeat, maybe I can wait and see what happens, but we'll see. So she was just like, if you start having bleeding, come back to the ER. If you start passing blood clots, come back. If you start showing signs of infection, fever, discharge, odor, come back to the ER. So I said, okay. So I went home. I was very emotional. I think I like slept for the rest of the day, because I'm just like waiting around to have a miscarriage, like waiting to feel cramps, waiting to have bleeding, just waiting for my baby to die. And this is where I started to really get angry about the Georgia heartbeat law, because that's not right. Like, one, people should have a choice. People should always have a choice about what they want to do with their body and with unborn babies. And while as a mother, I'm going to be the first person that wants my baby to survive. You, as a politician who don't know me, you don't care about my baby's life like I do. I care about my baby's life, but I'm thinking about this as a slow death. You're telling me my baby is not likely to survive, but I just have to go home and wait for him to no longer have a heartbeat. Like, that's wild to me. And then that's torture to me, because I'm literally at home waiting for something devastating like that to happen. Like, it was just such an emotional state. So by this time, it's Thursday. I'm just like trying to just feel better. So the next day is Friday. I finally started bleeding on Friday. So I'm like bleeding like a medium flow, like bleeding, passing small blood clots. So I'm like, okay, I'm expecting for this to be a lot more painful if I have a miscarriage. So checked in with my doctor friends, and they're like, yeah, if it's a miscarriage, it's going to really hurt, especially with you being 16 weeks. So just get ready, just get rid of the kids, get you some pads, get comfortable, and, this is probably what's about to happen. So that's what I did. I'm just like sitting on the toilet most of the time, drinking water, trying to stay calm, trying to mentally prepare myself to experience this situation. And I did message my doctor and let her know that I was bleeding and having clots. So she asked me to come to the ER. So I get to the ER. Now at this point, this is already my technically this is my 4th ER visit. And she checks my blood, see if I'm developing my white blood cell count is up to see if I'm developing an infection. My doctor was seeing the pain that I was in, like emotionally, and she really was trying to figure out how she could try to advocate for me to be able to get a medical abortion and not just let me wait around to have a miscarriage. But everything was fine. Like, my blood work was normal. She did the ultrasound. The baby still had a strong heartbeat. So at this point, it's bittersweet, because I'm like, okay, like, you're still pushing, you're still trying. But on the other side, I'm like, this is still prolonging it because I know they can't do anything as long as there's a heartbeat. So I was discharged. Same thing was told. If you have this, come back to the ER. So the whole first week after my water broke, I was very anxious. I went ahead and called out of work. I was waking up in the middle of the night every night crying, feeling worried, feeling nervous, feeling sad, and just like trying to just get through all these hard emotions because it was not easy. So I began to see my OBGYN twice a week, starting that second week. And she would basically check the heartbeat every time the baby still had a strong heartbeat. And she started me on blood pressure medication because my blood pressure had been consistently elevated even before my water broke. So now I'm technically at my 5th ER visit because I started to have discharge and spotting. So I wasn't bleeding every day, but I was like bleeding every other day, and it was kind of light. I started to have a lot of discharge. I was still leaking fluid every single day. Even when I wasn't bleeding, I was leaking fluid every single day. And when I get to the ER, because of discharge, they keep asking me when's the last time I had sex. And I'm like, this has nothing to do with anything. Like, check on the baby, check on the fluid, check on the stuff that you know is already going on with me. I don't mind you checking me for STDs, but it's like once they got on the discharge path, they just swore I had an STD. So they keep asking me when last time I had sex. Like, I'm looking at them like, why would I sit up here and have sex and I know I don't have any fluid? Y'all already told me that makes me susceptible to infections. So no, I'm not having sex. So this is not, so I'm asking them, okay, so if it's not a STD, what would be your next train of thought? You had nothing. So lo and behold, it was not a STD, and they didn't do anything. They sent me home. The baby still had a strong heartbeat. They told me the same thing. If you have bleeding, passing clots, signs of infection like discharge and odor, come back. But this time when I listened to the baby's heartbeat, this was like one of the first moments where I really started to feel hopeful. Because at this point, it had already been a solid week since my water broke. And one of the doctors told me it would take about a week. And I'm just like, every time I get an ultrasound and I hear this baby heartbeat, I am getting so hopeful. And on the other side, I'm trying not to be too hopeful because they've already told me this is not likely to happen. So I don't want to get excited and then have a miscarriage and have to re-go through all those initial feelings. So I'm feeling very conflicted, but I can't help but to feel hopeful because you keep proving to me that this is going to work out. So that's how I started to feel at that moment. And so like the next day, I asked my partner, like, can we name the baby? Because I just wanted to give like concrete meaning to this person that was growing inside of me. And I was still at the point where I felt like I might lose the baby. But even if I was going to lose the baby, I wanted to be able to grieve properly and have somewhere to focus that grief by naming my child that I might lose. So my partner was down. In the middle of all this going on, I had checked my blood work from one of my prenatal visits, and I found out the sex was a boy. When I first found out the baby would be a boy, completely broke down because I have 2 daughters and I've always wanted a son, and I was just even more devastated that I gotta go through this. He gotta go through this. I'm still in my head like this is a slow death, and just going through a lot. But we named the baby, and with naming the baby, I made a conscious decision to have faith that he would survive. So I'm still trying to remain open to all the possibilities, even the bad ones. But I recommitted myself to doing my part to save my baby's life. So, because in the midst of this, I had stopped taking my prenatal vitamins, you know, small things like that. Because I'm like, I'm going to have a miscarriage. So I'm just like kind of mentally checked out because this is what I believe is going to happen. But at this point, a little over a week, once I named him, I found out he was a boy. I had 5 ER visits at that point. All times he still had a heartbeat. I had 3 prenatal visits at this point. All times he still had a heartbeat. So I'm like, I'm starting my prenatal vitamins again, praying every day, holding my chest, holding my belly, directly talking to him, directly talking to God, and thanking God for allowing me to have gratitude throughout this situation, because it really made me feel grateful to be able to even be a vessel for life, because I took for granted having a healthy pregnancy before. I took that for granted. And I know a lot of women struggle with getting pregnant and birthing children. So this situation really brought that gratitude for me, because that was something that I just felt like was a given for me, and it was no longer that. So I just started praying more, taking my vitamins. I went ahead and did my paperwork for work, like I'm not going back to work. And by, this is like the week 2, middle of week 2, still having leaking fluid every day, light bleeding, not every day, but still like sporadically, and weekly OB visits. And at some point, I think maybe like the 3rd week, I passed a huge blood clot. I just felt it like plop out of me. And I went back to the ER. The bleeding had slowed down once I got to the ER. And the baby still had a heartbeat. So for the 6th ER visit, they didn't do anything, and I was discharged and went home. So that is like up to 3 weeks. That was my journey for like the first 3 weeks after my water broke. So basically the goal was, if you could make it to 22 weeks, we'll put you in the hospital and we would start intervening and giving you medical care to try to help keep this baby inside you and help this baby to develop in a healthy way. But you're still not likely to make it to 22 weeks. You still should expect to have a miscarriage, but we're going to see. So I am in the hospital, as you can see. So I did reach my goal, my first goal. So I did reach 22 weeks this week. I'm very excited about that. But this video is long, so I'm gonna let y'all go and y'all get ready for part 3.